Get your hands where I can see him right now. Why were you running?
I wasn't running, officer. I was just trying to get out of the rain.
By the time Officer Nolan Graves called the tow truck, the whole block knew this stop had nothing to do with traffic. Darius Cole had both hands on the steering wheel, his engine off, his driver's license resting on the dashboard exactly where Graves had ordered him to place it. Blue and red lights washed over the windshield in violent pulses, turning the inside of the car into a strobe-lit cage. Graves stood outside the driver's window with one hand on his holster and the other pointing at Darius like he'd already decided what kind of man sat behind that glass. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Darius looked at him once in the rearview mirror, then toward the quiet storefronts on Mercer Avenue. 10 minutes earlier, it had been a normal afternoon. He'd left a planning meeting downtown, picked up a boxed lemon cake from a bakery his mother loved, and was on his way across town to meet city officials at the old courthouse. He was dressed too neatly for trouble: charcoal suit, white shirt, tie loosened at the collar, and his late father's silver watch on his wrist. The black sedan he drove was clean, registered, insured, and paid off. Everything about the moment had been ordinary until Graves pulled up beside him at a red light, stared too long, then lit him up before the signal even changed. Darius stepped out slowly, palms open. "Officer, is there a problem?" Graves didn't answer the question. His eyes moved over the car, the watch, the tailored suit, then back to Darius's face with open contempt. "Who does this vehicle belong to?" "It belongs to me." Graves gave a short, ugly laugh. "That's not what I asked. Who does it belong to?" Darius nodded toward the registration sitting in plain sight. "My name is on the document." But Graves had already made his decision. He circled the sedan as if he were inspecting stolen property. He leaned into the open door, ignoring Darius's protest, and started rifling through the center console. When Darius said, carefully, that he did not consent to a search, Graves turned fast enough to make the threat feel physical. "You don't get to tell me what I can do, boy." That word landed harder than the flashing lights. A woman waiting outside the bakery looked up immediately. A delivery driver paused beside his van. The tow truck hadn't arrived yet, but the scene was already taking shape, the kind of public humiliation that starts with one accusation and grows teeth the second the wrong person decides to enjoy his power. Darius kept his voice flat. "I've done nothing wrong." Graves stepped closer until they were nearly chest to chest. "Then you won't mind me checking if this car came back clean?" "It is clean." "Then shut up and wait." The second officer arrived 2 minutes later, younger, silent, watchful. Graves spoke to him just loudly enough for the small crowd forming on the sidewalk to hear. "Possible auto theft. Subject is being uncooperative." That was the first lie. It would not be the last. Darius turned slightly toward the younger officer. "You can see my license, registration, and insurance right there." Graves shoved him hard between the shoulder blades before he could finish. "Face the car." The boxed cake slipped from Darius's hand and hit the pavement upside down. Lemon icing spread across the concrete in a bright, pathetic smear. The bakery owner came to the doorway, apron still dusted with flour, and froze at the sight. "Officer, that's my customer," she called. He was just inside. Graves didn't even look at her. He grabbed Darius's wrists and cinched the handcuffs tight enough to turn the skin white around the metal. Darius inhaled once, sharp and controlled, but said nothing. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. "There is no reason to cuff me," Darius said. "There is now." "Resisting?" "I did not resist." Graves leaned him over the hood so hard the side of Darius's face struck the metal with a dull crack. A few people on the sidewalk gasped. Someone started recording. Someone else whispered, "This isn't right." Graves heard it, and instead of stepping back, he doubled down. That was the moment the stop changed from ugly to reckless. He knew people were watching, and he decided he'd rather dominate the scene than survive it. The tow truck arrived while Darius was still bent over the hood. Graves waved it in like he'd been planning it before he ever flipped his lights on. The driver, a thick-set man in mirrored sunglasses, hopped out and asked if he wanted a standard impound. "Investigative hold," Graves said. "Vehicle may be stolen." Darius lifted his head. "That is a false report." Graves yanked him upright by the cuff chain. "Everything about you is suspicious." The words spread across the crowd like gasoline. Phones went higher. The bakery owner stepped off the curb now, no longer willing to stay back. "I saw him pay with his own card," she said. He's here all the time. Graves snapped at her without turning around. Go back inside before you get charged too. That was when the younger officer finally spoke. Quietly, cautiously. Sir, dispatch says the plate returns registered to him. Graves stared at him for a long second. Then he keyed his radio and said, with the confidence of a man used to not being questioned, the registration may be fraudulent. Continue the hold. Second lie. Darius could feel the situation rotting in real time. He knew the danger of angering a man like this in public. Every word had to be measured. Every movement had to be slow. But when Graves reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, then switched it off before shoving it into an evidence pouch, something in Darius's face hardened. You cannot take my phone without cause. Graves smiled for the first time. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed being feared. Watch me. Then he crossed the line that would destroy him. Darius told him there were confidential government documents in the leather case on the back seat. Graves opened it anyway. He dumped the contents onto the hood of the cruiser in full view of the crowd. A folder stamped with official seals slid across the metal. A binder. A letter on state letterhead. A press packet. Graves barely glanced at them. He was too busy performing power. What is this? He sneered. You printing your own credentials now. Darius's jaw clenched. Those documents are protected. Graves held up the top sheet with 2 fingers, reading just enough to mock it. Then he crumpled the page and tossed it back into the case. The younger officer looked down, and whatever he saw drained the color from his face. Sir, he said, almost under his breath, I think you need to read that. Graves didn't. Instead, he ordered the tow driver to hook the sedan. Steel clanged against the chassis. The front wheels lifted. The crowd reacted all at once, a wave of outrage rolling across the sidewalk. One man shouted that the whole thing was on live stream. The bakery owner said she had to stop from the first shove. A teenager from the bus bench said the officer had called him boy. A delivery driver stepped closer and said the traffic camera at the intersection would have audio from the open window. Graves turned toward them with the same arrogance he'd shown Darius. Any of you interfere, you're going in too. Then a black SUV pulled hard to the curb. A woman in a navy suit got out before it fully stopped. State badge on her belt. Phone in hand. 2 men followed, one carrying a camera case, the other wearing a courthouse security jacket. She took in the scene in a single sweep. Darius in cuffs, the official documents scattered across a cruiser, the sedan halfway on the hook, the crowd filming. Her face changed instantly. Uncuff him, she said. Graves gave her the same contempt he'd given everyone else. Step back. Active police investigation. She walked straight past him and held up her badge inches from his face. I said uncuff him. Now. Graves glanced at the badge, then at her, still not understanding that the ground had just shifted under him. She pointed at Darius. That is Darius Cole, appointed this morning as special counsel to the State Civil Rights Review Board. In 12 minutes he is supposed to brief the mayor, the county judge, and the press on a statewide police misconduct audit. Do you understand what you've done? For the first time since the stop began, Graves looked uncertain. He turned toward the papers on the hood, snatched up the wrinkled letter he had thrown aside, and actually read it. The official seal stared back at him. The appointment order. The meeting schedule. His eyes moved faster now, then stopped. Too late. The younger officer stepped back as if distance might save him. The camera operator who'd stepped out of the SUV lifted his lens. Not to film Darius. To film Graves. The crowd went silent in that strange, electric way people do when they realize they've just watched a powerful man walk off a cliff. Graves tried to recover. There's been a misunderstanding. Darius finally looked directly at him. His voice stayed calm, but it had changed. It no longer sounded like a man pleading to be treated fairly. It sounded like a man making a record. No, he said. There has been misconduct. The cuffs came off. The tow truck lowered the sedan. Graves began talking fast now, saying procedure, saying suspicious behavior, saying safety concerns, all the desperate little lies men invent when their authority fails them in public. None of it mattered. Too many people had watched him choose this. Too many cameras had caught the sequence in the order it happened. And worst of all for him, the man he had targeted was now the last person in the city he should have handed evidence to. Darius did not accept the mumbled apology. He did not leave quietly. He asked for the names and badge numbers of every officer on scene. He asked the bakery owner to save her footage. He asked the delivery driver for his statement. He asked the state aide to call the Attorney General's office before anyone inside the department had time to sanitize the report. And then he went to the courthouse with bruises on his wrists and his father's cake ruined on the pavement behind him. By sunset, the video was everywhere. Not one video. 4. The bakery security camera showed Graves approaching the stop with no urgency, no caution, no sign he believed Darius was dangerous. The teenager's live stream captured the shove, the handcuffs, and the word boy, clear enough that even local stations who usually hid behind caution started using the word racial profiling on air. The delivery driver's dashcam proved the license plate had been visible the entire time and that Graves had ample opportunity to verify ownership before escalating. Worst of all, dispatch records confirmed the younger officer had been told the vehicle was properly registered before the tow order was made. The department tried the usual first move. They said the matter was under review. They said they took allegations seriously. They said the video lacked context. Then the context arrived and buried them. Body camera footage from the younger officer surfaced first. Graves' own camera had somehow failed to activate, an excuse investigators had heard from him before. But the second officer's audio caught Graves laughing before the stop, saying, "Let's see whose car this really is." Internal GPS data showed he had followed Darius for nearly 6 blocks before pulling him over. That killed any claim of spontaneous suspicion. Then records emerged showing Graves had ordered 14 investigative holds in the last 11 months, 11 of them involving black drivers, 9 ending in no charges. 3 of those vehicles had been sent to the same towing company. The tow company owner was his cousin. Now it was no longer one racist stop. It was a pattern. Then it became a racket. The state opened a formal inquiry first. The city council held an emergency session the next morning. The police chief, pale and evasive, called the incident unacceptable but could not explain why Graves had remained on patrol after prior complaints for unlawful searches and excessive force. Darius refused every private meeting they offered. He said if they wanted to speak to him, they could do it under oath. Within a week, federal civil rights investigators requested all stop data tied to Graves' unit. Within 2 weeks, local reporters uncovered internal memos showing supervisors had downgraded civilian complaints against him without interviews. One complainant had been a black pediatrician whose SUV was impounded outside his own home. Another was a retired Army sergeant forced face down on asphalt during a registration check. The stories had been there. The department had simply counted on nobody important being humiliated on camera at the exact wrong time. This time, they were wrong. Darius filed a civil suit in federal court alleging false imprisonment, unlawful search and seizure, racial discrimination, property interference, and retaliation under color of law. The lawsuit named Graves, the city, the department, the towing company, and 3 supervisors who approved his reports without review. Graves was suspended first, then fired when forensic analysts determined he had altered his written statement after learning Darius's identity. He'd added a claim that Darius reached toward his waistband. No witness saw it. No video showed it. The forensic timestamp did. Then prosecutors charged him. Official misconduct. False report. Evidence tampering. Deprivation of rights under color of law. The towing contract was terminated. The internal affairs commander resigned before being subpoenaed. The police chief announced retirement, effective immediately. A phrase that sounded voluntary only until the city attorney stopped defending him in public. The Justice Department expanded its inquiry from one officer to the entire department's tow and seizure practices. State auditors found racial disparities in impounds so severe they triggered a separate review of municipal fine revenue. Graves had not just targeted one innocent man. He had become the loose thread that unraveled an entire system built on intimidation and selective enforcement. The trial did not help the city. Jurors watched the footage in full. They heard Graves call Darius suspicious before he knew anything about him. They heard dispatch confirm the car was registered. They watched him search private documents without cause, seize a phone, order a fraudulent tow, and physically slam a compliant man against a hood in front of witnesses. They heard from experts on police procedure who testified that nearly every decision Graves made violated policy, law, or both. Then they heard from ordinary people who had stood on Mercer Avenue that afternoon and understood exactly what they were looking at before anyone else in power was willing to admit it. A bully with a badge who thought nobody would stop him. The city settled before the jury could return on punitive damages. $5.7 million. Publicly approved. Non-confidential. No sealed terms. Darius insisted on that. He wanted the number on the record where every taxpayer, every officer, and every young black driver in the city could see what unchecked power had finally cost. But the money was not the end of it. The consent decree that followed forced body camera compliance audits, outside review of vehicle seizures, automatic suspension for officers who disable footage during enforcement, and a public database of citizen complaints and outcomes. Supervisors lost the ability to bury misconduct in closed files. The tow rotation system was dismantled and rebuilt under independent oversight. Federal monitors remained in place for 3 years. Graves was convicted. The badge was gone. The pension fight failed. His name became inseparable from the case that taught the city, painfully and publicly, that humiliation backed by authority is still abuse. And abuse caught on camera can become evidence powerful enough to crush the men who once thought themselves untouchable. As for Darius, he returned to Mercer Avenue months later, not for revenge, not for spectacle, but to buy another lemon cake for his mother. The bakery owner recognized him instantly. So did the people on the sidewalk. But the street felt different now. Not healed, not innocent, just honest in a way it had not been before. The lies had been dragged into daylight. The man who abused power had lost it forever. The institution that protected him had been forced to answer in public. And the innocent man they tried to break had become the reason a city could no longer pretend not to see what was happening right in front of it. That is what real accountability looks like. Not a quiet transfer. Not paid leave. Not a vague statement about better training. Exposure. Investigation. Judgment. Consequence. If you believe abuse of power should always end in justice, comment below and subscribe.